On today's episode, the Chicago Blackhawks dropped their second game of the preseason, falling 3-2 in overtime up in Minnesota. I'll go over the key standouts and takeaways from the loss, as well as a preview of tomorrow's preseason matchup with the Detroit Red Wings. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you all for making the show your very first listen here to start off your day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and follow me on Twitter at Jack Bushman2, or you can check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Also, be sure to go and smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. The start of the regular season is right around the corner, folks. You don't want to miss out on all the latest episodes, all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. You can easily do so by subscribing to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And if you're listening to the audio version of today's episode, a frequent audio listener, and like what you're hearing, then please feel free to go and leave me a review, and also go and spread the good word. Tell a friend, a family member, a loved one. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm really trying to boost up the numbers right now. It is a very intriguing Chicago Blackhawks season that's kicking off in less than 2 weeks. I'm super stoked to break it all down, and I would greatly appreciate you all helping me out along the way. All right, enough of that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all, as always, for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. I hope everyone's weekend is treating them well thus far. It seems like this might be the last little hoorah, the last little bit of warm weather that we're going to get. And you never know, quite honestly. Chicago has not 4 seasons, as we all know. It's got about 11. We'll probably get first winter here in probably a couple weeks, and then third or fourth summer, I forget. So I might be getting a little ahead of myself here. But if you do look ahead, at the weather, it does seem like it's going to start creeping down into the 60s and the 50s. So I hope you all were out there enjoying the warm weather while it lasts. And the Chicago Blackhawks, as I'm talking to you all right now, just wrapped up about an hour ago their second game of the preseason up in Minnesota against the Minnesota Wild. Did not go their way. They fall 3-2 in overtime. Sadly, the perfect season is out the window, folks. 88-0-0, throw it all away. I can't believe it. But on a serious note, this was the first time in the preseason that we got to see the second training camp group, if you will. We saw a pretty good chunk of the NHLers take part in the preseason opener against the St. Louis Blues on Thursday. Well, we got the second group here tonight against the Minnesota Wild. And I mean, to put it nicely, not the sturdiest offensive bunch, to say the least. And also considering, as I outlined on the preview of this matchup that came out on Saturday afternoon, the Minnesota Wild had a decent amount of their NHL defensemen in the lineup for this preseason contest. Not the studs up top and Jonas Brodin and Jared Spurgeon and Brock Faber, but they did have Kalen Addison in there. They did have Alex Goligoski. They did have John Merrill in there as well. And then probably most importantly, they did have Philip Gustafsson in net. I mentioned during the preview that he was active for this game. Wasn't sure if they were going to go with him or Zane McIntyre in net. Yeah, they ended up going with Philip Gustafsson. And that combination of the Wild's defense and Philip Gustafsson in net really gave the Blackhawks fits throughout a majority of this contest, especially in those final 40 minutes. But funny enough, the Blackhawks actually got off to a roaring start just over a minute into the game. Mackenzie Entwistle skated into the offensive zone with speed and absolutely ripped a shot past Gustafsson to put the Blackhawks ahead 1-0. They had the juices flowing early, but as the Minnesota Wild started to settle in, it seemed like their physicality really, really began to give Blackhawks issues. The Hawks offense really couldn't get much going, and then they started to kind of take over the game from there. They wound up netting 2 goals in response there in the first period, one from Ryan O'Rourke as his shot from the blue line wound up sneaking through traffic and actually deflected off of Blackhawks defenseman Louis Crevier in front of the net, which was a bit unfortunate. Whoops, pardon me there. Bit unfortunate there for Crevier. It's one of those, though, that he's going to have to learn. It's either get out of the way or you block it for sure, because the goaltender's worst nightmare is you getting a piece of it and it going past him. That's what happened on Minnesota's opening goal of the game. And then shortly after, in the first period, Kevin Korchinski committed a bad turnover behind his own net. Nikita Zaitsev got caught painting pictures of ponies or whatever he was doing in front. He did not have a good night. And it's probably foreshadowing not a good season. I do not have much confidence in Nikita Zaitsev, but that put the Wild ahead 2-1 after 20 minutes. And then it felt like they just sort of leaned on their defense and kind of just leaned on the Hawks. They weren't generating a ton of scoring chances themselves, but they were certainly the team that was kind of leading the charge. They were the aggressors, if you will, that was they were controlling the game. And the Blackhawks were actually pretty fortunate that the score was kept 2-1 all the way into the dwindling minutes, because they only registered, I think it was 11 shots on goal after, I think in the final 38 minutes of the game. They had 8 in the second period, and then they had 3 in the opening, 14, 15 minutes of the third. So they weren't really mustering up all that much. They couldn't get any sustained time in the offensive zone. But then with the extra attacker out with just over a minute remaining, kind of the opposite of how they began the game, just over a minute in, Mackenzie Entwistle scores. And with just over a minute left in regulation, the Hawks have Arvid Soderblom out for the extra attacker, and Tyler Johnson jumps on a rebound from a Taylor Raddysh one-timer to tie the game up 2-2. That wound up forcing overtime for the second consecutive game to kick off the Blackhawks preseason, but it didn't take very long for Minnesota to net the game winner. Connor Dewar skated into the offensive zone with speed and recognized that he had Cole Guttman, a forward, playing defense on him, kind of gave him a little 1-2 shake, and then pulled up and fired a wrister past Soderblom for the OT winner. That lifted Minnesota to the 3-2 win. No harm, no foul, though. Obviously, just a preseason game. The Blackhawks did not have their ace squad, and quite honestly, for how much they were stymied throughout the course of this game, I was just happy that the Blackhawks were able to get this one into overtime. That in and alone of itself seems like a win to me, considering the roster that they had on the ice for this one. And really, the only reason that it got to overtime was because of the contributions from what served as the top line in this game, Tyler Johnson, Cole Guttman, and Taylor Raddysh. Undoubtedly the Blackhawks' best line of the night, I thought. I mentioned the Blackhawks didn't have a lot of sustained offensive zone time. They didn't really have a lot of that, creating dangerous chances at least. Well, it felt like they didn't have any aside from this line. It felt like the Guttman line was really doing a majority of the heavy lifting last night. And I thought they were cycling it well. They showed some good chemistry. They were creating scoring chances, finding open spots for one another. And I thought Taylor Raddysh and Cole Guttman were the Blackhawks' 2 most impressive players on the ice in this one. For Taylor Raddysh, he finished the game with 5 shots on goal, which was a team high. He also led all forwards with 21 minutes and 52 seconds of time on ice, which was second among all Blackhawks skaters. You could tell right from the get-go, Luke Richardson wanted to have him on the ice as much as possible, and he seemed like he was feeling good. I know it's only one preseason game of action, but I thought Taylor Raddysh looked a little bit shiftier. He was skating a little bit better, and his stick handling looked good too. He pulled off a really nice deke around a defender to give himself an open look in front. So I thought it was a really stellar first performance of the preseason for Taylor Raddysh. And after seeing that, you all know, if you're a regular listener or viewer of the show, that I've kind of been preaching for Taylor Raddysh to get an opportunity up on that top line with Connor Bedard and Taylor Hall. I really want to see that after the confidence and the skill that I saw out of Taylor Raddysh tonight. Really solid preseason debut out of him, I thought. But I thought Cole Guttman was honestly better. I thought Cole Guttman was the best Blackhawks player on the ice. Looked really awesome and just so smooth in all areas of his game, man. He just really feels like a gamer. I was really impressed with his ability along the boards. It seemed like he was winning a majority of those battles. And also the other thing that really stood out about Cole Guttman, and I'm not going to put him in the same breath as Connor Bedard, but one thing that good goal scorers do is they find and create open space for themselves. And yes, he wasn't going up against, Minnesota's NHL lineup or anything, but Cole Guttman a couple of different times tonight was able to create some open space for himself with the puck on his stick and was able to get off some quality scoring chances. And that's what good goal scorers do. It's kind of too early still to know whether or not Cole Guttman's going to be more of a goal scorer or more of a playmaker. We got too small of a sample size out of him last year, both in Rockford and at the NHL level, but he did a lot of good things on the offensive side of things. He always just plays hard-nosed in all areas, man, and also combines that with a little bit of a skill game too, which I absolutely love. Has me super stoked for Cole Guttman's first full NHL season this year. He didn't have any points for the Blackhawks actually in this game, but he was a factor. It felt like basically every shift, and he also hit the post twice on one single shift, so easily could have had a point or two in this contest as well. All right, folks, in just a minute here, I will outline some other key takeaways and standouts from the Blackhawks' second game of the preseason. But first, real quick, I need to talk about Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to take care of themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. And that's why Jace Medical offers the Jace case. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and also gives you the peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in the time of an emergency. And Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in your hand at all times. It's so simple. And they also handle everything from the online evaluation that you need to license, pharmacy medication, delivery, ongoing consultation, and care. And don't get caught unprepared. You can also save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the code LOCKEDON at checkout at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Promo code LOCKEDON to get an additional $20 off. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, again, please make sure to go and smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. All those good things that help drive SEO in this favor. Chicago Blackhawks are kicking off the regular season in less than 2 weeks, folks, and you don't want to miss out on any of the storylines that are going on through training camp, who's going to be getting those final roster spots, how's Connor Bedard looking. I will be keeping you updated each and every day right here on Locked On Blackhawks. All you have to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel and you'll get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each and every day. All right, segment 2, getting into some other key takeaways and standouts from the Hawks' 3-2 loss to the Minnesota Wild on Saturday night. I also got to give a huge shout out to Boris Tkachuk and the second line. That's, seemingly like the extra line for the Chicago Blackhawks right now, seeming like the odd group out behind Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, and Corey Perry. I'd have to pencil them in as the fourth line right now behind the third line of Tyler Johnson, Cole Guttman, and Taylor Raddysh. But I'll tell you what, Boris Tkachuk and Mackenzie Entwistle, who I'll get to here in just a second, they're making a really good push for those final roster spots that the Blackhawks have in their forward group. And Boris Tkachuk had a really solid night. He had assists on both of the Blackhawks goals, added 2 hits in 14 minutes and 45 seconds, and really made the most of his opportunity, I thought. And I think that line most certainly, besides the Guttman line, the bottom 6 for the Blackhawks really didn't contribute all that much offensively. They were stymied all night long by the Wild's defense. This line actually gave the Hawks some solid shifts in the offensive zone. Entwistle obviously cashed in for the goal just over a minute into the game. They didn't have many dangerous opportunities after that, but they were spending more time in the offensive zone than they were defending. And from a line that's, Boris Tkachuk, Mackenzie Entwistle, and Joey Anderson, you'll take that night in and night out. So really good to see that Boris Tkachuk come out with a strong purpose in his preseason debut. And funny enough, with the forward group being so thin for this game, Boris Tkachuk actually got an opportunity to go out there for the Blackhawks power play. And oddly enough, he didn't look too out of what's the word I'm looking for here? He didn't look too out of place is what I'm looking for. He looked like, I'm not going to say Boris Katchouk looked like he should belong on a power play, but he was making some skillful type of plays and reading the defenders well. And I also got to give him credit. He made a heads up little tip play in transition to set up that opening goal for Entwistle. And if you go back and watch Tyler Johnson's goal that tied the game 2-2, Boris Katchouk made a fantastically patient play at the top there to wait for the defender to come and try and block his shot while he's loading up for a clapper at the top of the blue line there. And then he slides the puck over to an open Taylor Raddysh. Once that defender commits to him, Raddysh one-times it on net. Johnson's able to find the rebound there to tie up the game. Boris Katchouk did a lot of good things in this game against Minnesota, and so did Mackenzie Entwistle. Like I said, scored a beauty just over a minute in. I did think, as I already referenced, that line did kind of cool down. They didn't have too many dangerous opportunities. When Mackenzie Entwistle's been getting an opportunity so far here in camp, he looked good in both of those scrimmage games, I thought, and had a really impressive night. And again, spending more time in the offensive zone than he did defending, you'll take that out of your fourth line night in and night out. Another guy that's fighting for those final roster spots. Really good showing from Mackenzie Entwistle and Boris Katchouk. I also got to bring up Samuel Savoie, folks. A little bit of a tough scene for the Chicago Blackhawks in this game. In the second period, Samuel Savoie was looked like he was going in to commit a check on Alex Goligoski against the end boards, and it looked like he lost an edge all of a sudden, or perhaps he might have stepped on Goligoski's skate. But Savoie went crashing into the boards really hard and went feet first into the boards, and quite honestly, it did not look good. His leg just folded right underneath him, and you could hear him screaming out there on the ice. You could hear a pin drop in that arena after that happened. The stretcher had to come out and take Savoie off of the ice. A really scary scene for him there, and just a tough incident, man, because that kid works so hard and plays with an edge and just always has a smile on his face. And every Blackhawks fan that's gotten to know him since being drafted in the third round last year really loves his game and what he's all about. So wishing for the best for Samuel Savoie. Did have to get stretchered off the ice, but did throw everyone a thumbs up, which is definitely a good sign. We don't have much of a further update, but I'll be sure to let you all know as soon as I do. But prayers up to Samuel Savoie. Scary looking incident there. We're wishing you all the best. Nolan Allen, got to talk about Big Al, because while the forward group standouts were pretty obvious in this game for the Blackhawks, I just outlined most of them. I thought Nolan Allen undoubtedly was their best defenseman of the night. He just played such a simple game. He didn't make any mistakes and did a really good job of skating the puck out of harm's way. And that's one thing that I've really noticed that's been different about him in this training camp compared to other ones where I personally haven't been so necessarily impressed by Nolan Allen. I'm someone who wasn't as high on him as I was with other Blackhawks defensemen in the system. Ethan Del Mastro was someone who I've always had higher than Nolan Allen since they've been in the Blackhawks system. But there's no denying how impressive this kid has been. He just plays such a simple game. His skating, like I said, seems to be better than ever. He's really shifty out there, able to turn on his edges really well in both the defensive zone and the offensive zone. He's been doing some really good work in the O zone to create some open looks for guys. And boy, is he an absolute grown man. I mean, I thought Nolan Allen was a grown man when I saw him play in the preseason last year for the Blackhawks. Another year under his belt of developing and getting stronger. Man, he is a rugged defenseman. And I understand why Luke Richardson has been so impressed with him, man. Keeps giving him opportunities, and man, Nolan Allen keeps making the most of them. I thought he was undoubtedly the Blackhawks' best defenseman, and I'll be the first to admit, it looks like I might have been wrong about Nolan Allen. Also got to give a shout out to Arvid Soderblom and net. He did give up a little bit of a weak winner. Connor Dewar was a little bit far out from close to the top of the circles, and I thought that Soderblom was fighting the puck a little bit all night long, but he still wound up stopping 29 of the 32 shots that he faced. And it was just one of those performances where it didn't look pretty, but he still got the job done, and that's really all that matters. But you would like to see him look a little bit more comfortable in net in his next time out, but he did, no doubt about it. Made some big saves for the Blackhawks, particularly in those final, 38 minutes where I talked about the Hawks had only 11 shots on net. Minnesota was coming with some pretty good chances. The Vinny Lettieri line was really giving the Blackhawks defense fits all night long. Arvid Soderblom did a really good job to keep his team down by only one in those final two periods, which allowed for them to tie it up and force this one into overtime. And last but certainly not least, how could I go talking about this game without discussing Kevin Korchinski? And the great debate is only going to continue, Blackhawks fans. Korchinski led all Blackhawks skaters with 22 minutes and 26 seconds of time on ice, also added 4 shots on goal and 1 block shot. His playmaking and his offensive zone awareness was on full display once again. His skills are undeniable. It's a skill set that you can't really deny it. It could undoubtedly help this Blackhawks team. But at the same point in time, he did have a couple of blunders in the defensive zone. One led to the second goal of the game for the Minnesota Wild, and then he had another which nearly wound up in the back of his own net. It actually came just inches away from crossing the line, but there's still that weakness in Kevin Korchinski's game that you can't deny either. His offensive abilities are undeniable, but you still can see he's still a little bit raw on the defensive side of things. And as I've said many times, I do think that he could be a full-time NHLer this season, but I also think there are just clear-cut reasons for him to go back to juniors. I'm okay with the decision either way because Kevin Korchinski is in a really good spot, but to me, it just feels like another year, considering Kyle Davidson's mindset. It's not going to hurt. And to let Korchinski gain some weight, get a little bit thicker, just go and play top pairing minutes in Seattle and just get better defensively. I know there is also a case for him going up against grown men in the NHL and learning on the fly. Maybe that's the best route for him defensively as well. And again, I don't think either choice is wrong, and that's why it's a really good spot to be in. But for me personally, I just keep leaning towards Korchinski going back to Seattle. But I do know it's ultimately going to come up to, that 9 to 10 game stint that he's going to get to open up the season, because the Blackhawks undoubtedly are going to want to burn the first year of his entry-level contract to get him to that second deal sooner. But yeah, more of the same from Kevin Korchinski tonight, looking really good in the offensive zone, a skill set that's very unique, but defensively still a little bit of flaws, but very intriguing one way or the other. I'm excited to see what the decision is ultimately going to wind up being for the former 7th overall pick. All right, there are my final takeaways from the Hawks. 3-2 overtime loss to the Minnesota Wild. Coming up in just a moment, I will go over a quick preview of their next preseason matchup on Sunday later this evening against the Detroit Red Wings. All right, segment 3, before I let you all go and enjoy the rest of your weekends, I do want to quickly preview tomorrow's matchup, or I guess tonight's matchup, with the Red Wings at Little Caesars Arena, as well as the lineup that I believe the Blackhawks are going to roll with at this point in time. I don't know if they're going to be having a morning skate. It hasn't happened as of yet, so I do got to take a little bit of a stab at things here, but I also want to go over some things that I think all you fans should be keeping an eye on throughout their third preseason contest. But as far as the lineup goes, I believe we're probably going to see the same top line: Taylor Hall, Connor Bedard, and Ryan Donato. But I've talked about this on the last couple of shows. Philip Kurashev did look good in his small little action. I know it was only a couple minutes, but he cashed in for a goal. I do wonder if Luke Richardson is going to try tinkering with things a little bit, which he has said that he will do throughout the preseason. So I wonder if Donato or Kurashev could be flipping places, but I do expect Hall and Bedard to remain together. Reichel and Athanasiou probably on the second line. Could probably flip-flop Donato or Kurashev. The third line, I think we'll probably see Nick Foligno and Corey Perry playing the wings. And then I figure we're going to see Jason Dickinson make his preseason debut, because on Friday he actually made his first appearance and appeared to be a full participant in Blackhawks practice after missing some days due to maintenance. So I would guess that he's going to be centering that fourth line. It seems like he's kind of the leader right now as to solidifying that final center spot in the Blackhawks lineup, if I had to guess. And then for the fourth line, this is a little bit of a guess as well, but based on who hasn't played in either of the Blackhawks' 2 preseason games thus far, I think we're going to see something along the lines of Michael Tepley, David Gust, and Gavin Hayes, perhaps. I believe Hayes might have played in the preseason opener. I don't think he did. I could be wrong on that, but I know Gust and Tepley haven't played for sure. I figure that Luke Richardson is going to be wanting to give them at least one opportunity here in the preseason. So I'm guessing the Blackhawks lineup is going to be looking something like that. Pretty similar top 9 forward group, except Jason Dickinson is expected to be back in the mix. Then on the defensive side of things, considering we saw Kevin Korchinski against the Wild, we also saw Nolan Allen, Ethan Del Mastro, Louis Crevier. I'm guessing we're going to see Wyatt Kaiser and Seth Jones once again together as the top defensive pairing. I do think Jared Tenorti is finally going to make his preseason debut here as well. What I'm interested to see is, are they going to put him with Connor Murphy? That was a pairing that kind of worked surprisingly well for the Blackhawks throughout points last season. Or are they going to go with Alex Vlasic on the second pairing with Connor Murphy? Either or, I think the odd man out is going to be playing with Philip Ruse. He's the last defenseman that hasn't gotten in any action so far here in the preseason and is capable of playing the right side as well. He has done that in the past. So figure it's going to be Kaiser, Jones, Tenorti, Murphy, and Vlasic Ruse on the back end for the Blackhawks. And then in net, if I had to guess, I think it's going to be Jackson Stauber making his first start, because we did see Peter Mrazek play half of the preseason opener. Drew Commesso came on in relief for Mrazek at the midway point of that game. And then Arvid Soderblom played the entire game for the Blackhawks against the Minnesota Wild. Mitchell Weeks was the one backing him up, but considering he's not really in the mix at all for goaltender of the future, I don't think they're too worried about not giving him any action, especially when it looks like they're going to have a Stauber and Commesso tandem down in Rockford. So quite honestly, I think it's going to be a game for Jackson Stauber, and either Drew Commesso is going to get some more action, or maybe they go with the big dog in Peter Mrazek, but I do believe it should be Jackson Stauber in net. As far as what we could see out of the Detroit Red Wings lineup, I did notice they also are having a preseason back-to-back over the weekend, and they played Mo Seider, Alex DeBrincat, Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, their first-round pick in this year's draft, Nate Danielson, who was a prospect that I personally really loved. They also had Adam Kopp and Ville Husso in the lineup. So they played a lot of their big dogs last night. So going to be a little bit light for the Red Wings. If I had to guess, we're probably going to see David Perron, JT Compher, Joe Veleno, Jeff Petrie, Blackhawks legend Oli Mata, Shane Gostisbehere, and then based on Husso going last night, I think we're going to be seeing James Reimer in net. But another opportunity for the Blackhawks for a lot of these young studs to kind of showcase their stuff. I believe Bedard should be playing. Same with Lucas Reichel, Wyatt Kaiser. Another opportunity to see what these Blackhawks youngins are made of. Excited for this one to get underway on Sunday, 6 p.m. Central Time puck drop. It will be televised on NBC Sports Chicago. I know that's music to some of your ears out there after the game against the Wild was not and had to be streamed. Go Hawks. I'm going to let you all enjoy the rest of your weekends. That's going to do it here for today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and check me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you could also go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until the next episode, that's going to do it here for the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.